and circle back with you here about, and do the best we can to answer what is in your mind at this time. All right, so thank you again very much for coming to today's Southern Colorado Working Group. It's going to turn over to Dee, but who's going next? Next slide.
Okay, so most of you have seen these and know what we do when we're down here. Go on to the next slide. One more, sir. Thank you. So there are three things that we talk about: training, community, and stewardship. But primarily what we like to do is hear from you. So if we're briefing something and you have any questions at all, please stop the briefer and raise your hand, whatever, yell at us, ask a question, because we want this to be a peaceful dialogue, not a PowerPoint show just to show you. So please open dialogue today. Go ahead, Chris. All right, we'll start with Mike.
Morning, I'm Mike Camp, Chief of Training. As you can see, we have several training events planned for this spring and this summer. The largest one will be May with the division event. And it'll be the whole month of May. We'll be bringing a large amount of soldiers and equipment down to Pinon Canyon to train. Any questions on the planned events? Go ahead.
Mike,
Go ahead.
you mentioned earlier about the numbers that might be coming in May. Do you want to release those numbers approximately, what might be coming?
Yeah, that's fine. Approximately. It's Divardi, right? So a couple thousand?
A couple thousand soldiers. And some of 2nd Brigade Striker Combat, Brigade Combat Team will be coming, and we'll be doing some company live fires.
And later on, when DPW comes up, they'll talk more about the environmental action that we're doing for this training event.
Go ahead, next slide. So our land management, our ITAM program, you probably heard us talk about it before. It's integrated training area management. We spend about $1.5 million a year. We work with the Corps of Engineers to take care of the land, reseed the land, take care of trail repair, erosion control dams. On the bottom is one of our recent trail repairs. We make sure, we armor everything so we don't have a lot of erosion when the rains do come. But we do have them coming down starting this week, right, Anthony?
Yes, sir.
So ITAM is coming down this week to start on some more projects. But you can see some of the repair. That's the road that we did get repaired out there. And we have several other projects coming. And every year we build out 5 years worth of projects to take care of land, erosion control. We work with the state on the erosion control dams to make sure we don't have any sediment leaving the installation. So we're taking real good care of the land. We did send out our seed mix to some people who asked for it. You never got it?
Yeah, I was copied on it, so
Okay.
we'll look again at your email address, ma'am, and make sure we got it. So I still have that.
But we do have the seed mix that we'll put out. That we do plant natural grasses, and it's approved by our environmental. So, but we do take good care of the land. And when the 2nd Brigade is finished with their training event in May, we will do remediation and make sure all the land is put back the way it's supposed to be after the training event. Go ahead, Nat.
I just have a question. If the people that are in charge of reseeding and all that, if they know the true ecology of shortgrass prairie?
Yes, ma'am. Our people, to get their job, they have to be, they have to have a degree in certain fields to get the job that they have. So our LRAM specialist, Philip, who's not here today, was actually a professor out in Kansas, and we actually stole him from teaching out in Kansas. And he's our guy who's putting together LRAM projects to take care of the land. So there is requirements.
Specifically shortgrass prairie.
He has multiple studies that he takes care of. So, but we definitely can link you up with him if you'd like to talk to him. Any other questions? Go ahead, sir.
How does the live fire ranges work, and how does that impact the resources out there, and particulates in the atmosphere and so forth? And I know that on the map, the live fire activity appears to be visually significantly increased. And so how does live fire affect your work?
So live fire is the key to us training our soldiers. And the big thing about Pinon Canyon is that we have the land to support the live fire that we need for the future. So to be able to support long-range fires for the Army, having 235,000 acres compared to 89,000 acres of training land at Carson makes a huge difference to be able to support the needs of the soldier. So to be able to move forward with training our soldiers and adding more live fire at Pinon Canyon, it trains our soldiers better to fight our nation's wars. And I wasn't sure on the other part of the question.
Well, you're in the business of mitigating and restoring and preserving the natural environment, right?
Yes, sir.
So I wonder, what's the equation there? How does live fire activity affect your job?
Well, that's the biggest part of my job is live fire, training our soldiers.
Well, I'm not talking about the other side of it.
Yeah,
Preserving
but taking care of the land afterwards.
Yeah.
So here at Pinon and at Fort Carson, the ranges and training lands have to be here for the soldier of the future. So we have to make sure the land is taken care of, and the ranges have to be taken care of. And we have life cycle management for everything that we do. There's a life cycle management across the Army. So soldiers 20 years from now have to be able to use this same land to train. So we have to take care of this land. We cannot destroy it. It's not like burning down the hotel like a rock group and leaving. So when new commanders come in, they get that briefing that, hey, this range and this land has to be here for the soldier of tomorrow. So I was a soldier, and my son is a soldier. So he's using the same land that I trained on when I was a soldier. So we have to make sure that we're taking care of the land, the ranges, so they're here for the future. So it's not like we're just destroying everything and leaving. We have to take care of it. We have to keep it up. For year after year, every soldier who's coming in the Army has to be able to train forever. As long as America's here, we're going to have soldiers. We're going to train.
And kind of to his point too, the way we train is I would say it's more advanced than what it used to be in the past. Now we have systems, kind of what we're talking about, where we're firing, artillery and things like that. It's very specific zones in which we fire in. We've gone through these zones extensively and identified anything in the area that has a cultural impact, that could have an impact on the outside area. And now we have, they're called NFAs, so they're no fire areas. So we can build these into the systems that we're training with. So for instance, there's a soldier on the ground, he's calling in for fire, doing the training that he needs to do. If we mess that up, the system itself literally will not allow us to fire into it. So there's multiple things that are built into our training to preserve the area, the land, and then to mitigate any mistakes that may happen. Also, the training rounds that we have now, they're inert, so we still get the same effects, but there's not depleted uranium and things like that in them. It's an inert round, so the impact on the environment it's very minimal.
It has to be safe for our people to go there also. And so there's, like Sergeant Major was saying, there's a lot of checks and balances on what we do, but it also trains our soldiers so when they go to a foreign country that we're not destroying one of their cultural sites. And we tell them, you can't tear down this mosque, blow up this mosque, just like we can't tear up this cultural site on Pinon Canyon. So it's teaching them that for the future also. Go ahead, sir.
No, I was going to say, can you jump 2 slides forward, please? One more, and one more. Next one. So I just want to show this map as an example. And you got a great question, sir. One of those being is, how does the Army establish a live fire training area? To dispel some of the myths out there, you can't just shoot any weapon system anywhere in a military, territory, right? So Mike Camp and his team, they understand the trajectory, they understand the physics of every type of ammunition that we have. And as they're establishing, say, a live fire area, they look at all the potential firing points, they look at the potential arcs of the round, You know, not just the route it could go, but what are deviations that may happen if there's an accident? You know, and then they develop the impact area. And as part of that, the DPW environmental team goes through that impact area to identify cultural sites, historical sites, things worth preserving. And that all goes into the system that Mike Camp develops, that Sergeant Major Manuel was talking about, the no-fire areas. So when you look at artillery and mortars, a lot of our systems now are very advanced. They're all very digital and computerized. So if a fire mission does come up and the round is going to land in a no-fire area, it'll literally come up on the screen saying cannot shoot. You have to go in and override the system. The only time we would override the system is if we were in actual combat. In a training environment, there's no reason to override that system. You know, that's why those no-fire areas exist. And we use no-fire areas all the time for many different things. In this case, cultural sites. In combat, it could be friendly locations. It could be locations for hospitals, non-combatant, organizations that we know where they're at on the ground. We can establish those. And that impacts pretty much every indirect fire system out there. Artillery, mortars, it can impact close air support or aviators. It's very well briefed. I had an opportunity to train at Pinon Canyon in 2015 during Operation Raider Focus when I was in 1st Brigade. I think that was June of 2015. And I had a digital map in my Stryker command vehicle. And that digital map had a red dot all over this place that designated that where any historical and cultural site was. So as I was coordinating a 750 soldier battalion as the operations officer, and I was planning off my digital map, I knew where every spot was. And it wasn't just a dot, because when you zoomed in on that dot, that circle blew up. So you were still maybe 300 meters from an actual site, based on the type of site it was. Impacts, either no fire area or no transit area. And we take those things very seriously as how we look at how enhancing Pinon Canyon, and how we could leverage modern technology to go after that.
I saw that map with the red dots.
It's incredible, isn't it?
There are lots of them, more than I could easily count.
Yeah, it was amazing, and when I was going through that exercise, part of our operations order preparing for each exercise or each phase of the operation as we were maneuvering from west to east, up this box. Part of that, as we were issuing the execution plan, was, hey, how do you deal with these cultural sites and these no-go areas, as we were calling it? And as we had these terrain models that were probably the size of this floor, physical terrain models that a unit will set up, and when we rehearsed walking through it, a lot of those key cultural sites we had them marked on a terrain model, little flags, little points, so we understood our maneuver corridors and where we can't go. Were there times that, hey, during night that we might have stumbled into those? Yes, and we reported those to range operations, so Mike Camp and his team understood potentially where we had entered those zones. But like I said, you're not coming right up on the thing itself. There's a buffer, and we report those violations of that buffer. And that allows Mike Camp, our environmental team, and potentially even our conservation law enforcement officers to come out and look at that specific site to determine if negligence was involved. Was it an accident? Do we need to open an investigation? So we can hold our soldiers and our units accountable for those type of things. Does that answer your question in some ways?
In some ways, I
Yeah.
mean, I probably I'm not very familiar with, military training
No, that's okay.
in this context, so
Yeah.
I probably have a vision of live fire training that may be unrealistic, but my concern is that, visually, the thing I can see is the current live fire range
Mm-hmm.
as compared with the proposed map
Yeah.
is a significant, apparently a significant increase, at least in terms of the area.
It is.
And I sort of understand that the pace and the intensity of that live fire training might increase as well. So, my concern is that you're increasing the burden on that environment and increasing the workload that you're going to have in terms of maintaining it. And it just, from my uninformed perspective, it just seems like Pinon Canyon in the past has claimed that they don't have adequate space to accomplish their training mission. So increasing the training doesn't seem to jibe with sustaining the viability of the environment there.
I think we have the size and the space to execute the training that we need to. But it goes back into some of the other things of what happens after a training event. So, as we start talking about ID Max here in a couple slides coming up, they're gonna set up a temporary impact area, on the map itself. Right there. So that's temporary impact area that we're looking at, proposing to do some artillery and mortar training at some upcoming training coming up. What happens afterwards is, my camp and his team, they go through that temporary impact area and they assess the damages. We also, as part of ITAM, it's not just leaving rounds in the ground. There's things.
What's ITAM?
That's the Integrated Training Area Management Program. It's what he uses environmentally to remediate the land. Part of that is, if we have the ability to, and we see it, is to get the shrapnel, those expended rounds, out of the land too, and get it out of the environment. And a lot of military bases across the country, they do that. So when I was the chief of staff down in a place in Southern California called National Training Center, we were averaging about 1.5 million pounds a year of lead, metal, shrapnel that we're pulling out of the ground and recycling it out of the environment. We don't want to go back to the old days. You can look at some of them, like Fort Ord in California, how they left a lot of that things in the dirt, and ruined the land for decades and centuries. So that's the purpose of the ITAM, is to remediate that and clean up the damage from any type of live fires.
And one thing to your point, just to kind of, frame a reference for like the way we train, kind of like in your mind, we're maneuvering, we're training, and we're calling in live fire, right? Because it's sets and reps. It's very localized where we fire. So, kind of like where we're talking about, like within this, we're gonna have just a little temporary impact area. So as they're maneuvering, they may be calling for fire here, but we only bring the rounds into the same spot. So everything's very localized. So we know exactly where it's landing. We try and keep it as small as we possibly can. And then that way, it's easier on us when we go back and do the mediation afterwards to be able to assess what it is. So I know it's like, oh, this is just a very giant impact area, but we keep it very localized. The smaller we can get it, the better. And we're pretty precise when we shoot.
And before any live fire event happens, like if I was a unit, I would turn my plan into my camp and his team so they can review it. They understand exactly what we are asking to do. And having known my camp for many number of years back when I was on the unit side, there were times where they came back and said, hey, unit, you can't execute this plan this way. It's not safe. It's not environmentally sound. You need to adjust these plans. And they give the recommendations back to the unit how to adjust those plans. So it's good for the environment, but the unit can still train effectively. So as a garrison commander, I have two key staffs that I rely on here. One is my camp's training division, and the other one is the DPW environmental staff. Both of those staffs are important to me to give me the assessment of how we can execute training, but how we can mitigate, the environment as well. And then worst case scenario, who I, as the garrison commander, need to hold accountable if we do the wrong stuff.
Thank you.
Yep. Yes, sir.
Hey there.
Hey there.
So the question is, for me, is, that looks real close to the brown sheep camp. Is that,
No, Brown Sheep's Camp's down here in the corner. And you come off of Route 2, comes around here. Brown Sheep's here in the corner. And then, of course, this is the pipeline, and we have to have a buffer on that. That's one of our mitigation processes, is keeping a certain amount of distance away from historical sites. And to ensure that, up on the high ground, they have observers that will observe where the rounds are hitting. And if they see something not go where it's supposed to, they cease fire immediately and see what the problem is. And we do the same thing at Fort Carson. You have to have what's called an OP, observation point that has a trained observer that observes where that round goes. So when we take this into consideration, we look at, LEAP, make sure that Route 1 and 2 and 3 are open so people can maneuver around for safety, emergency vehicles. We also look at what's available. Like the canyons are our main cultural sites. Of course, the hogback down here is very precious to everybody. We stay away from the hogback. No one's allowed on the hogback. It's closed off to everyone.
And then,
Yeah,
can you
that is
explain the
heavy
difference between a
artillery.
training round and then an actual live round as well? Because I think that's a big thing that people kind of want to know too.
So there's actually service ammo. Service ammo is the stuff that we actually engage the enemy with. So like a tank 105 service ammo will travel.
You can launch it into orbit.
You can launch it forever.
Like,
Service ammo has a very shortened, it's called surface danger zone, where that round only travels so far and then it falls. So, and it also doesn't have an explosive warhead. There are certain things that we do train with some service ammo, but that's not here. We're not doing that here. There's only certain places like White Sands, places like that. But service ammo is totally different than training ammo. One, it saves taxpayer money by using training ammo. Training ammo is cheaper than service ammo. When you start shooting depleted uranium rounds that punch through enemy tanks, you're not going to use that for training. So the service ammo is more environmentally friendly. It's also cheaper and it doesn't fly as far. So.
And you've told me this before, it would be more like a dud. So when you're sending them, say, from the northeast corner to the southwest corner, those would be low impact because they would be duds. Is that what I understood?
But duds is a totally different type of wording. Unexploded ordnance is stuff that can still hurt someone. Dud producing is different. There's different types of ammo. Stuff that can hurt you, stuff that doesn't hurt you. And that we have to be, because we have to send our people in there. So we're not going to put our people in danger. So our ITAM program, we have a lady, Leslie, she's RTLA, Range and Training Land Assessment. So she comes out and she assesses the land after training. And then she makes a recommendation on, we need to reseed 200 acres, or we need to do maneuver damage on this, and we go out and we do some bank sloping so the drainage is correct. So we have to send our people into places also, and we can't put them in danger. So that like normal ranges, like these small arms ranges, it's no different than you shooting a range in the back of your house. We're using kind of almost the same type of ammo you're using. Training ammo is not anything that's going to hurt someone if they pick it up off the ground, depending on what it is. So, go ahead, sir.
Some people are concerned that your consumption of electricity out there, it increases. There's been talk of a data center being incorporated in the installation. Is that?
You want to say no? Yeah. You can say no just as much as I can.
Okay.
No, I can't. So, the military, has chosen 4 military installations to rent and lease property for the creation of future data centers. Fort Carson's not one of them.
Okay.
All right. At no point right now do I have any order instructions to organize and oversee the establishment of a data center. Because you're right. What are the 2 things that data center needs? Water and power. And so right now, Fort Carson has not been chosen, to host any type of future data center. I'm sorry, I'm going to jump back in on service ammunition real quick.
Go ahead.
Been in the Army almost 26 years. I'm an infantry officer by trade. So I'm very comfortable on the tactical side when it comes to training, deploying. I have 4 combat deployments between Iraq and Afghanistan. I have never seen service ammunition or go-to-war ammunition ever in a training environment in almost 26 years. The only time I have physically had go-to-war ammunition was physically in Iraq and Afghanistan. Everything we use stateside and also overseas training areas is training ammunition. It's a very different, set of ammunition. And like Mr. Camp said, shorter range, less impact to the environment. Oftentimes with like artillery rounds or mortar ammunition, it could be inert, meaning there's no explosives in that warhead. It's either a concrete round or just a hollow head itself. You know, there may be like a shotgun shell on the tip of it that creates a little puff when it lands, just so an observer can see it from long range and a distance. You know, but using high explosive ammunition, there's very few places in the Army that would use that right now. And some of that is because, you know, we're keeping our go-to-war stocks available. I'm sorry, there was a question coming up. Yes, sir.
One thing that, I think that for me, it's really good to understand the accuracy that you guys have with your firing. Because when that transfers over to real warfare in another world, you could save, you know, people, buildings, and that's one of the big problems that we're seeing right now, like in Israel and some of these other places. Where
Sure.
just everything gets destroyed. And I think the United States military has that capability of pinpointing of what they're actually doing, and I think that's important to me.
When you look at the, you know, our technology of our weapon systems and how they've been designed over the last 30 to 40 years, really since the early 80s. The Western way of war and how the Americans fight, it's about precision, all right? And it's important to us as a military that precision negates collateral damage. If you look at the Russian way of war, and often how the Russians fight, they're about mass. They will put enough artillery to blanket a whole 1,000 meters by 1,000 meters to destroy one target, all right? And that could be hundreds of rounds of artillery they put in that grid square. We will focus on very minimal amount of munitions to destroy that one target to negate, you know, collateral damage. How do we do that? A lot of that is the current technology. So when you look at artillery, the target location area, we have specially designed rounds that are precision guided. You know, our helicopters use a lot of precision guided rounds. If you look at our tanks and our infantry fighting vehicles, the electronics that are inside the turret itself, there's a laser rangefinder that will laser the target. In this case, my camp's my target. I'll laser them. That computer system will account for the wind, temperature, barometric pressure, the movement of my vehicle, the movement of his vehicle if he's stationary, and will align that gun to put that first round on target. All right, and I have a lot of experience with the Bradley fighting vehicle, both in combat and in training. I've been able to hit targets at 2,500 meters in training first round, no problem. But it's simple laser that weapon system and trusting in the digital systems. First round on target at 2,500 meters.
And to put that kind of in a frame of reference, the MGRS, the Military Grid Reference System, a 10-digit grid will get you within 1 meter of the target. So it's very small. And then kind of what the commander was talking about on our mobile platforms, I mean, that's even if the target's moving, right? So we have something that's called kinematic lead. So like if I'm in my system and we have moving targets, I can literally laser it, track it, the computer system will do the math and will literally fire it based off the speed, the trajectory, the slope, however the vehicle's moving. Very precise.
All right. I heard data center, and I'm really
I don't
concerned
believe
about
you got
data
target.
Thank you for your answer.
center. Whoa there. Come
You
on
weren't
here.
firing heat from a Bradley, so
Old school, like heat, like it arcs and does weird stuff.
gonna arc
Yeah.
and go to the right.
Aim point versus strike point. Anyways, yeah, we're nerding out here. I'm sorry. Thanks, Mike. Yeah.
Is there any other questions?
I
Sorry.
have one more.
Go ahead, man.
I heard that they're gonna bring 2,000 people in, and how do you handle the reseeding after such events in a drought, which we are massively in?
So we do have certain planned times of the year when we know it's best to reseed. So we'll go out and mitigate the land and get rid of the ruts and the you know, if they turn, they make a pile of dirt this high. We have what's called drags that we drag behind the vehicle to re-level the ground. And then we wait until a certain time of the year to reseed. We're not gonna waste taxpayer money reseeding when we know it's not gonna grow. So there's certain times of the year that my ITAM does the reseeding. And same as just like a rancher planting crops. You know, back in Indiana when I was a kid growing up planting cornfields, same thing.
And they have irrigation, but you guys don't have irrigation out there.
We depend on where we're at and what we're doing. Some of the contracts that we do with the Corps of Engineers, and there's disturbed ground, they have to have a certain amount of growth. And our DPW does the same thing when they do work. They have to have a certain amount of growth, and they'll come out there and water to get the amount of growth on the disturbed land. So it depends on the contract and how we write it and what water is available and the amount of disturbance that we have, the amount of acres. So, but we definitely will wait until it's the right time to seed. I'm not gonna seed in the blazing summer, know it, we're wasting taxpayer dollar. Any other questions?
You put that water down with the water truck, or how do you do that?
Yeah, we have water trucks that also will spray. A lot of times the contractor will bring in, like range 135 up at Fort Carson is one of my sniper ranges. And part of their contract is they had to have so much growth before that, for their contract. And they were out there watering it, and they have to pay for the water and everything, but it was part of their contract. So it all depends on how it's written, but my people will not plant until it's the right time of year. Any other questions? Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Again, my name is Melissa Statz, and I would be the person you contact if you are wanting support for your parades and your events that you guys host. Here is a forecast of what we have going on so far, what we have requested for the Trinidad Armed Forces Parade in May, as well as the Trinidad Water Festival. We're going to be sending some people down here. We have requests for the 4th of July parade and also the 4th of July La Vida parade. So between Norm and I, we tackle those requests at the beginning of the year, as it takes quite a while to get those processed to make sure that we can get the soldiers down here for your event. So if you have any requests or just questions, you're welcome to contact me or just tap me here at the end of the meeting and just give me your email or your request. Also for this meeting, if you want to remain on the email list, or if you have any questions, or for anybody in the room, you can go ahead and send those to me as well, or just let me know that you'd like to remain on the email list. And I'd like to make sure that I have everybody's a good email address for everybody, so you guys can continue to come. Is there any questions?
Yeah, I have one last question, sorry. So, is it possible, or is there a work in progress to set up a town-sponsored citizen group that can have the ability to come in and make sure that everything that's being told to us can go in and check and make sure all of this is really happening as reported? In terms of like the reseeding, the planting, just people who are concerned about the going beyond the scope of what we're being told.
Yeah, absolutely, and in May, when we do this exercise, we plan to have a community day. So every time we do a large training exercise, we bring the community in. I'll send it out to the newspapers and stuff down here so that we let everybody know. But and if there's specific particular things that you want to look at, you just email Melissa and we'll see what we can do to facilitate that during the community day, maybe take you up on a side tour of a couple things that you'd like to see. But we have community days probably a couple times a year where we bring the community in to look at historic sites or reseeding or whatever it is you're interested in, as long as it's not within a certain proximity of the live fire. So we'll work that out with you and figure out a time.
Also, will the jets that'll be flying there, well, they don't have to stay within that specific
Jets?
designated area.
What jets? We don't have jets.
There's no jets.
No, ma'am.
Were there jets at some point?
So certain exercises, the 4th Infantry Division, or based on what units trains there, they can put in a request for Air Force or Navy assets, jets, to support that exercise. Typically though, when an aircraft is supporting a ground exercise, there's certain altitude restrictions that they stay at, because the speed and the distance those aircraft travel, they can't fit inside Pinon Canyon itself, right? They will go beyond Pinon Canyon. But when we do those exercises, we coordinate with the FAA so they understand the airspace and what aircraft's coming in. And oftentimes, military aircraft, they're on 2 different bands, right? They got to continue to talk with the FAA and whatever regional tower controls the airspace. but also on the military side. So there's constant checks about those, and we have to highlight in advance with the FAA what those aircraft are doing, their routes, and the altitudes and speeds that they travel at. Does that answer your question, ma'am? Okay.
And if May doesn't work for you, we're happy, and if you have a group of people, you can put together 6 or 8 people, and we want to pick a different day, we'll facilitate whatever is good for you.
Thank you.
All right, ma'am.
One last thing, I am also the noise complaint line between Norm and I, so if you have any noise complaints and you just don't know where to call those into, I have a sheet with a phone number, and we respond to those immediately and just let you know what's going on. And if it's, we'll investigate and do all the homework to make sure that you get the proper response, okay? Thank you.
And I'll add one last thing. Our soldiers who come down here to these festivals and events in Trinidad have the best time, and your community treats them exceptionally, and they always come back with rave reviews about how well taken care of they were, so they love to come down and do those community things. We've had a couple of commanders along the way who are like, hey, why are we sending soldiers out on, the 4th of July, they can't spend it with their families. I said, give them another day off, they'll enjoy this. And so they always come back really, really liking this community, so we appreciate that.
Dean, I was gonna say that the community really appreciates when you guys send them down here, because we, as like for the 4th of July parade and the Armed Forces Day, the people that turn out are very appreciative of you guys being here.
Yes, sir. Thank you. All right. Next slide. Angie, or, yep.
Good morning. So we've already been talking a little bit, we've already introduced some of the slides, so I don't think I need to go through a whole bunch of them. So I wanted to talk about 2 things today. We've already been talking a little bit about the Enhanced Mission Training Project, and that's what most of your questions have been about. So the Dudded Impact Area, some of the ranges we've been proposing. We had the public meetings in December, so it's probably what most of you are familiar with. And we had received some written comments and some oral comments on that, and so I wanted to go over some of the major themes that we've been seeing, making sure we heard you guys. If there's anything we missed, if there's anything you wanted to add, this is a good time. Put my pen and paper up here. So talking about new ranges, of course, if we got new ranges, we need some place to put that in those munitions, so we need that at impact area, and some changes to the airspace, mainly not so much the footprint, but maybe we need to raise it. And then the map is on the next slide, which we were just looking at.
Let me jump in about airspace restriction. So if we're not using Pinon Canyon, what's typically happen is we won't restrict the airspace. So the FAA, other aircraft can continue to fly unimpeded through that area. We're doing this so when we are exercisers and we coordinate with the FAA, they have enough time to coordinate with all the other flights, airlines, things like that, to alter their flight plans, so this training can continue.
Very good point, sir.
Yeah, just real quick on the airspace. Fort Carson has the same thing. We have 5 layers. Denver Center, when there's real bad storms, we'll call our RTO desk and say, hey, we need to take away Charlie airspace. So they can use our airspace to safely get people in and out of the airports. And we'll shut down whatever we're doing in that airspace. So the same setup is going to be here. We work directly with the FAA. And depending on what we're shooting or what we're training, we only take a little slice. And we'll have 5 different layers, and we call up to Denver Center and say, hey, we need Bravo airspace. So we're up to 25,000 feet AGL above the ground or whatever. And then only very seldom do we actually use the whole 60,000 feet of airspace. And I think probably in the last year we didn't use it at all at Carson, did we?
We did not, no, sir.
So we only take what we need for the airspace, and we have those levels planned out with the FAA. So.
And there's other aspects of the airspace too. So like our fire department, Our fire department is really pushing hard to modernize. And they've brought on board several drones and have trained the firefighters on how to use drones. Really for two purposes, right? One is wildfire. To understand the scope and scale and size of a wildfire, use a drone to capture that day and night. Second is search and rescue. So a couple weeks back, I got a call one night saying, hey, we have a missing 3-year-old girl on post. You know, and it was like sub-freezing temperatures. They can't account for her, but they have the tracks in the snow. You know, the head of Director of Emergency Services says, hey, fire department's got drones on site. Drones are getting ready to go up to acquire where this little girl is. And that's important for us to have that modern technology, because it's not just about Fort Carson. You know, we have a fire station down here at Pinon Canyon that supports the local community as well. You know, and having that capability for them, whether it's search and rescue or understand wildfire, because we have mutual aid agreements between us and the local area. You know, if there's a challenge or an issue off base, our firefighters are prepared to respond, and they do it all the time down here. Just like if we have a major incident on our training area, the local municipalities, you know, fire departments are prepared to support us as well. So it's a mutual benefit agreement there. I'm sorry, Angie, go ahead.
Oh,
Yep.
those are all good points. The point I wanted to make is that the airspace proposal is not in a vacuum, right? So the FAA is a cooperative agreement agency on that. So we're working with
God
them
bless you.
on that as well. So so we're working in tandem with that. So since they are responsible for that airspace, right? As we're making that proposal, we're working with them. So that's not something that we're just coming up with on our own. So we're working with them. So the public engagement, which is kind of my world, right, on National Environmental Policy Act, as well as the cultural resources. So this is kind of my component, a little bit less so as far as the actual training. Some of the things we heard, some of the things we anticipated as well, right? So some of the things my subject matter experts, and you know, so Roger Payton's subject matter experts, right, paying attention to how we might affect the Purgatory River, right? Water quality, water availability, how we might be impacting the shortgrass prairie, right? So soil productivity, soil compaction, are we gonna see more rilling? How will this change how we maneuver out there? Will that mean that we're gonna see impacts in areas that we didn't see impacts before? Air quality, fugitive dust, right? Will this change where and how we see dust? Wildfire risk assessment, of course, right? So now that we didn't have haven't had live fire down there before, so now we will. This is gonna change where and how wildfires might exist down there. That might mean that we need to think about how we fight fires, the kind of equipment we need down there. These are all things that the public said, hey, are you paying attention to this? So we, of course we are, but they're all good points. So we'll make sure that we include those in the environmental assessment. Cultural resources, we know that those are always an important topic. At Pinon Canyon, as well as Fort Carson. We don't hear about it as much in Fort Carson down here. We have wonderful cultural resources at Fort Carson we care for as well. But down there, we will be doing a full assessment for cultural resources. So you'll see that in the environmental review. And we will be including an assessment of the historic trail, Santa Fe Trail, trail. So those are highlights. Of course, there's a whole bunch of other things. But these were kind of the themes we've seen over and over and over again in those comments. We wanted to make sure. Yeah, yes.
So I have a question about air quality and monitoring air quality. So what would be happening there that would compromise the air quality? And how is that moved from here to there if the air quality is bad? Does that make sense?
So you're asking what would impact air quality as far as training? So we're specifically be fugitive dust. So right now, right, we maneuver.
And what is fugitive dust? Sorry.
Dust that has not a point source. So driving around on a dirt road, right? Okay. The road, the dirt that comes up behind your car, that's fugitive dust. Okay. And so that would be, so right now we do mostly maneuver training. We drive tanks around. So driving tanks around on a dirt road causes dust. So if we were talking about firing munitions and it hits the ground, a plume of dust. So that might change where that happens. So maybe now we don't see it leave the installation, but now we might change how we maneuver because we used to be able to maneuver over the whole thing, and now we're moving. We're reducing that. So maybe now we need to think about, is it going to leave the installation? So we don't have those answers yet because we don't have the environmental assessment yet. But those are things we're asking our subject matter experts to analyze for.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
I have a question. I've been told that with the shortgrass prairie, specifically that when it is disturbed, the shortgrass prairie is a carbon sink. Once it is disturbed, all that carbon comes up, and that affects the air quality for sure.
So you're asking about greenhouse gas emissions?
Yes.
Okay, and I don't have, again, I don't have the answers to these things, but that's something we can, take a look at, or we can.
And also, if you are current and in compliance with NEPA out there.
Absolutely, we are,
Okay.
yes, yes. For training right now, for maneuver training, yes, we are absolutely, we have the environmental impact statement from 2015, training and operations.
That was
We
10
complied
years
with
ago.
that. Yes, yeah, and it's been reviewed every
I thought
5
it was
years.
supposed to be done every 5 years.
No ma'am, well, it doesn't have to be redone every 5 years, it just has to be reviewed, and it's been reviewed every 5 years, yeah. And so, again, we're gonna review a whole bunch of things, you'll see it in the environmental assessment, but these were things we've seen over and over again, we wanna make sure we're capturing, and we'll, I'll make the notes of the, shortgrass prairies, a carbon sink. Some of the things that weren't necessarily natural resources or cultural resources, but other themes we've seen that we wanna make sure we're capturing, and some of these environmental assessments were a relationship, there was lots of questions about how, especially since we mentioned the pipeline and how we might wanna, we have alternatives that are related to moving the pipeline. People said, how does this relate to other, energy projects that are happening in the region? Either transmission lines that are being built from Colorado Springs through the area, some of the stuff that's happening on BLM lands, we wanna make sure that we're making it clear that they aren't related to those things. They're just happens to be a coincidence. But it was a good connection that people were paying attention to what's going on around there, making sure that people understood the airspace analysis. Again, back to your question, ma'am, you know, how does this relate to our existing environmental analyses? And we'll make sure that's clear, as well as, you know, what's going on with things like infrastructure and roads, right? You're gonna have more things driving down the highway, more things driving down 350. Let's make sure we're paying attention to how that might affect levels of service for those roadways and ingress and egress, emergency services, as well as how might this affect the regional economy, right? Not necessarily natural resources or cultural resources, which what you think of as in NEPA, but we do analyze for economic effects, and so we're going to do that. Timeline has changed a little bit because NEPA changed. So, very exciting things in the world of NEPA. You don't get to say that very often. So the regulations were rescinded this past summer, so we're just operating under the law. And so we have some flexibility in how we might be able to customize this to our community, customize the NEPA process to our community and to this particular project. So we're still trying to make sure we're making that work for everybody, but we know for sure we're gonna be analyzing the effects through the summer. And we'll be having our comment period this fall, October-ish, so we're still feeling out what that timeline feels like with our contractors.
I have one more question. Do you know if there's any plans about the pipeline and being taken up, or what are the plans?
No, ma'am, we don't know if there is or isn't, but we're including all those as alternatives just to make sure we're covering our bases. But that's not within our ability to choose that decision, to make that decision. That's
Why
not,
is that?
because it's not our pipeline. It's not the Army's pipeline.
But there's been lots of talk about how it's dangerous out there, they wanna move it, and the company that owns it refuses to put any money into it. I was just wanting to get clarity on what's going on, because a lot of people have been talking about
Hey,
it.
ma'am. Hey, good morning. I'm Walter Mattel. So I met with Kinder Morgan on several occasions that owns the pipe. There seems to be a sentiment that pipeline is poorly maintained and dangerous. That is not the case, because it is a major transmission. There's actually two pipelines that run in parallel, 6 inches in diameter. They are maintained by Kinder Morgan. As a matter of fact, I was at Pinon Canyon 2 weeks ago, and there was a Kinder Morgan crew out there checking the pipeline. So the pipeline is a viable transmission line that moves LP and natural gas both directions to feed the economy here. Kinder Morgan, obviously the pipeline was built in 1953, which was a good 30 years before Pinon Canyon was established. So Kinder Morgan has been very amicable to discussions about potentially diverting the pipeline. However, right now it's in their best interest not to do so because it's part of their business model. But we have been in negotiations with them, not necessarily us per se, but the Army and Kinder Morgan to find a solution to potentially move it. However, what is salient here is that the enhancements that we are working on with Pinon Canyon do not require that the pipeline be moved. We are working ways around to mitigate, so we are in no way near the pipeline, which should not pose any danger for it being damaged. Does that answer your question? Thanks, ma'am.
Will you be looking at the cumulative impact of the Pinon Canyon enhancement project holistically in relationship with other projects like the helium development that's going on, or is your job just to look at Pinon Canyon in isolation or holistically in terms of the region of impact?
That's a good question, and we will always look at cumulative effects, or kind of just how our project would be interacting with, and how other projects interact with our project. We don't, because we don't want to ignore how we're affecting our neighbors, we don't want to ignore how our neighbors are affecting us. So you'll see that in the environmental assessment.
Thank you.
Yes, yeah. Any questions about the answer, Jim?
Well, the thing that I can't get my head around is where the pipeline might be relocated to, because I don't see a real simple solution to that question.
Do you want me?
Will those potential proposed
I can.
repositionings of the pipeline be part of the alternatives?
Not part of, we won't be analyzing for those, because
Okay.
we don't have those, we don't have reasonably foreseeable solutions just yet, because again, like Mr. Martello pointed out, we don't have Kinder Morgan saying, yes, we want to move these here. We have some idea of where those, there might be better places for those to go. But we're not going to include those in this particular analysis because that would be, we would be jumping ahead, right? We'd be wasting taxpayer dollars to be analyzing for those effects well before Kinder Morgan was coming to the table and saying these are good places. Of course, we have our ideas about where we think they might be. Again, I think Mr. Martello.
So, sir,
sharing that.
good morning, how are you? In my discussions with them, okay, this is the pipeline here. It completely bisects the training area, right? We are fully cognizant of the not one more acre. So we have 235,000 acres, which is adequately sufficient, as the commander said. So if the pipeline is moved, the discussions would be that it would still retain inside the perimeter. So no new easement would have to be acquired outside the perimeter. We would just move it away so it would not be bisecting and give us greater flexibility and capabilities for maneuver. Does that make sense, sir?
Yeah, but then when I start looking at the perimeter of Pinon Canyon, you've got on the south.
Well, it can't go down here. This is way too, the terrain I don't think is conducive for that.
Okay.
But it would be somewhere up in here
Uh-huh.
that would get it out of the middle and give us greater flexibility.
Okay, yeah, I understand that.
Did I answer your question, sir? Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Walt.
Yes, sir.
And when those decisions were made, that analysis would be included in having these conversations again in this room, like. And so you'll be seeing, we'll have an environmental assessment for everybody, right, answering these questions and many others, and then we'll be having conversations about the effectiveness of that. So the next conversation is the IB Mass, which is the training we're talking about in May. If anybody has any questions about the long term?
So I'll jump in first here. So why are we doing IB Mass? So the 4th Infantry Division has been tasked by Department of the Army to undergo this modernization with this program called Next Generation Command and Control. And this is a brand new digital command and control system to enable units to talk at distance and at scale, unlike previous technology and current systems that we use. So the commanding general wants to execute, a scenario down here at Pinon Canyon in May. That's going to enable him to talk from Pinon Canyon back to Fort Carson in preparation for a major exercise in Southern California this summer in July. As part of that, he's bringing additional units down from various brigades that we have between 2nd Brigade and 3rd Brigade to look at how does this communication systems, command and control systems work with various type of units and platforms, whether it's an armored battalion or a striker infantry battalion. And while they're here, every unit has a training glide path certification requirement to train at certain scales or at echelons, as we call it. Part of that is individual. The individual is literally the soldier learning how to shoot his weapon, do medical skills training, use equipment, and you build upon that. So as part of that, he wants to do company combined arms live fire training. That's the biggest portion with this environmental assessment that we are doing for IV MAPS. Those rifle companies, about 135 to 150 soldier-sized units. They're required every year to go through that certification process to prepare them for contingency operations overseas or prepare them for, deployments, whether it's rotational deployments to Korea or to Europe itself or to the Middle East. That's why we're executing IV MAS here, really twofold. Certification of those smaller scale units, and then the exercise at the division level to talk and operate at scale and at distance.
And so I'm, again, back to analyzing for environmental effects or effects to the human environment. That's why I wanted to go over, so we will be seeing an environmental assessment for that, and we don't have, for those, NEPA, right, we don't have a categorical exclusion for that kind of training. So make sure everybody's getting a heads up, and I have everybody's email in here now, so I'll make sure you know when the environmental assessment comes out. We'll be taking a look at soils and effects of soils and vegetation, right, for this temporary impact area. So we're at live fire. For fire and munitions, we need a place for it to go. So there's a temporary impact area that's being developed that Mike Camp and his folks carefully have planned, trying to get around all of the great resources. Unfortunately, we have lots of cultural resources and lots of great natural resources at Pinon Canyon, fortunately, but it makes it difficult to train down there at times. But we'll be taking a look at the soils and vegetation resources. We know that we're going to have some temporary soils effects, right? Compact action. We got stuff shooting out, it's going to hit the ground, right? But it's very localized, like everybody was talking about, right? We know where we're shooting it, and we're trying to keep it in one place, and then we're going to work with Mike to make sure it gets remediated. Wildlife, temporary displacement, but we know that that's temporary, and they'll come back.
So is IV mass just
So this is
going to happen within that perimeter there?
This is the cultural resources. That's the next step I was going to talk about. This is the area of effect. Think about for cultural resources, right? If we're thinking about that, it's not just the actual where the cultural resources is, but it's what can we hear, right? So there's noise that comes from this. There's vibration that comes from this. So it means for cultural resources, it's typically a much larger area of effect than they say, like for soils, right? For soils impacts, it's going to be right where the thing lands, right? But for cultural resources, cultural resource includes how the feeling of the place, the lands, a little bit more of the landscape. So it meant that the impact area, the area of potential effects was a little larger. So I'm going to show kind of the largest area of potential effects. So that's the blue for cultural resources. The red dots are the cultural resources. So this isn't the whole impact area, but this is the area of potential effects. We're thinking about noise, dust, vibrations. And so this is probably the biggest effect that we have. For safety and quality of life, right? If we have anything that, for example, the unexploded ordnance out there, those will be cleared. Cultural resources is a difficult thing out there. As everybody said, right? So you kick a rock out there and you find a cultural resource.
Yeah, and kind of to her effect, what she's talking about, it's the same thing with the cyberspace. It's like, if this is the cultural site, we don't just put the cyberspace to keep them out of it right on top, and we build a buffer. just to make sure
Yep.
to be safe. And it's kind of the same thing there.
Yes,
Where
exactly.
they expanded outside the scope of the impact area just to make sure, to ensure that there's no second or third order effects that are happening that we're not aware of.
This includes even where if we're shooting over it. And so a handful of cultural resources out here, and so we're working with the State Historic Preservation Officer to look for ways that we can mitigate these effects. And so one of the things that we're proposing is something that we've been talking about with the State Historic Preservation Officer for a while is a study that looks at how some of our early Hispanic settlers utilized this landscape. It's a gap in knowledge across all of southwestern, all of southern Colorado really is kind of a whole context of how across the entire kind of southern Colorado, how did they use this landscape and how did they thrive here? What resources did they use? How did they use it? And so that's one of the things that we're saying is as a result of this training and some of the effects that we might have on these cultural resources, how we might mitigate that is to fund this study. And so we're working with the State Historic Preservation Officer to get the details of that study, what might we contract, what kind of products do we want, and so we'll be finishing up those details about a meeting with them in a couple weeks to make sure that we're on the same page and that we've built the right things into it. So that's probably the biggest impact from this, right, but we're doing our due diligence following National Historic Preservation Act and making sure we're doing the right mitigations. And so you can see the timeline here. So we've started our conversation with the State Historic Preservation Officer. We're working on our environmental effects analysis right now, and we'll have a public comment period here about the 2nd of March. And so I'll make sure we get that the word out to everybody when that's ready for that comment period.
Indeed, since the Army's been involved here, do you know roughly how many of these cultural sites have been identified and protected in ways they never had previously been?
Right.
In the 150, 160 range that we've identified and protected?
And so if you look at, you make a good point, Keith, if you look at a map of Colorado, if you could, if you looked at the map and you looked at all of the cultural resource sites, right, and you look, basically Fort Carson and Pinyon Canyon draw themselves, right, because we've done the most work in the state to identify cultural resource sites and to protect them. And so we are, as a federal agency, right, as opposed to on private land, right, on private land, if you destroy a site, you have no, there's no legal requirement to mitigate or to do anything in kind to make up for damaging that site. And so as federal agency, if we, even though we identify more sites than everybody else, if we have an impact on that site, we are legally required to, in some way, shape, or form, to mitigate that.
So they've been protected in ways they had never been.
Correct.
Would have never been.
Yes. So being on our federal land, they will always be protected in one way, shape, or form, either by not being impacted at all. So our canyons, quite often, a good part of our, right, we don't drive through them. Through the commander's right, we don't drive through them. We don't. They're buffered. We don't shoot them. We don't. But there are times when things, indirect effects like vibration, noise, dust, can impact them. And if those impacts happen, we do things to mitigate those effects.
Do you know how many archaeological sites or culturally significant sites there are at Pinyon Canyon?
As far as eligible for the National Register, eligible for the Register of Historic Places, 1,200. We also have about 600 that we haven't determined if they are eligible, so we treat them as eligible. And we have about 6,000 cultural sites. And those are protected in one way, shape, or another.
Thank you.
Yeah, a lot.
I've heard different numbers, so this is a number I've been interested in for a long time.
It's growing, right? That number is growing.
They are, right, yeah, so they're identified all the time.
And the assumption from that is that you don't necessarily know about all of them.
Correct. We have, and a good portion of what we don't know about are in those canyons. We don't train in those canyons really, so they haven't been a high priority for survey, usually where we're trying to survey. We have about 80% between Fort Carson and Pinon Canyon, about 80% survey, which is the highest percentage of an installation in the Army. So we have the most survey in the Army.
Is that ongoing?
It is, so if we have a project where we haven't surveyed, we've absolutely go and survey and identify sites. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
So I just want to share an experience that I had. My partner and I were looking for some land to build on. We were looking at getting out of the Front Range where I lived for 47 years. So this would have been approximately 10 or 12 years ago. We were looking at some land just north of Pinon Canyon there. And we had a picnic out on the land and playing our guitars, and a jet did come out of the little mini canyon there and flew not very far above us. And so that is my question about that. So, you're saying that all these appropriated sites will be, cared for, they're being identified and cared for and preserved. But to see a jet coming out of a canyon like that, I question whether or not that's enforceable.
So we're the Army, we're not the Air Force. So we don't control the Air Force unless they come into our restricted airspace. So we have restricted airspace at the Army Airfield at Fort Carson, Butts Army Airfield. We control that airspace. So the Air Force Base out of New Mexico, if they want to train, they will call us and say, hey, can I come into your airspace and train? There's places that the Air Force train that we have no control over. But if they do come into our restricted airspace, then we have control over it.
So it's
So the jets have nothing to do with the Army.
Nothing to do with you guys.
No, whatever, and like our PAO, if the helicopters are the ones that we get a lot of complaints about the helicopters, and you can call our PAO, especially if you get a tail number or anything, even the time and date of that helicopter, we can track it back to our airfield, and they'll be able to tell us who that soldier was flying that helicopter. But when it comes to jets, unless it's part of one of our training events, that they're invited to be in our airspace, we have no control over any of the jets.
And if that's part of our training events, right, we've analyzed it for effects to cultural resources, and if there are effects, again, to Keith's point, they would have been mitigated, or we would have determined, what those effects are, added restrictions.
And that's where we get with Ms. Bell, and depending on the event, it could be what's called a REC, would just be request for environmental consideration if it's a smaller event instead of an actual environmental assessment. So each level will decide that, and we'll work with DPW Environmental and Cultural on that.
Anything else? All right, we're gonna have to Robert.
So I'll try to make this quick as much as possible. So some of the interesting things that we've had going on is the Pinon J monitoring. We've been doing that since 2019. We've been in recent discussions with the Strategic Environmental Research and Development Program. Fort Carson is now under consideration as one of, there's 7 installations, and Fort Carson and Pinon Canyon are included in that 7 to do research by this agency, which is a DoD agency, across multiple installations because of the large range that Pinon Jays have. So they're looking at doing research on us, not out of our budget, but it's obviously government budget. And we've been analyzing some of our ARU, acoustic recording unit data. So we do have some calls at Pinon Canyon. They're not as frequent as like we had at Fort Carson, where the habitat is a little better. Pinions are, again, 9% of Pinon Canyon is pinion pine, so we don't have a whole lot there. But just to give you an idea that we are doing some monitoring on Pinon Jays down in that area. Monarch butterflies, we've been with them for quite a while as well. With DoD Monarch Joint Venture, if you don't know who they are, They are multiple agencies, not only U.S. Fish and Wildlife, but there's about 50 agencies from government to non-government that are a part of that group. So they come on Fort Carson and they do surveys for us. We did radio tag a female that made it 528 miles. So we actually monitored that monarch butterfly flying off of Fort Carson. That they have basically that little tiny tag actually is solar powered as well, so it's very lightweight, less than 5% of the weight of a butterfly. And so we do track. Keep in mind, the Front Range is a dead zone sort of for knowledge on monarch butterflies because it's not a major migration route. So we're trying to help them uncover the importance of monarch migration through Colorado. So we actually got one migrating butterfly documented. Next, we are contracting, it looks like. We're going through the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for a CSU agreement with a university. I can't say which university yet because they haven't bid yet on what that amount is going to, total amount is going to be. But it's to do a complete, kind of a comprehensive invertebrate survey at Pinon Canyon and at Fort Carson as well. But we have been doing surveys in-house and we have been documenting quite a few new species. It's not that they're new species, they're just not recorded before on Pinon Canyon or on Fort Carson, so we have those. And the reason for that is because there are a few national concerns with quite a few butterflies and bumblebees, and so that's why we want to get a more comprehensive survey for butterflies and bumblebees. Golden eagle nest. So last year our camera failed after we had it up on the nest for a while, but we did get pictures of eagle eggs in the nest before the camera failed. This year, the camera picked up an eagle landing on the nest and starting to use the nest right about the time the budget got signed. So maybe that's an omen, who knows. But we are monitoring that nest, and so that's one way for us to remotely see what the success rate on each nest and how many chicks hatch typically out of that nest. Next slide, please. So black rail surveys, we're on our fourth year, but we are on our going to be starting our third year here at Pinon Canyon. So we haven't had any detections anywhere other than Fort Carson for black rail. That is an endangered species, but we still monitor these sites. And after 3 years, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife will sign off on our monitoring and management plan for black rails. Bat telemetry, so we did get funded for another year of bat telemetry. We're trying to capture tricolored bats, but because they're so endangered and rare, we have not captured a single tricolored bat, but we do have other species that are also of great concern, such as hoary bats and little brown bats. And out of the 11 bats that were captured and tagged and tracked to where their homes are, one of them was a little brown bat, but they did DNA on it just to confirm. So we're waiting on that DNA results to come back. So we are monitoring where those bats, but again, it's the canyon lands are very high occupancy for bats because there's lots of hiding area and there's plenty of water. Hunting, even though we were closed part of the season due to the lapse in appropriations, we still had a very successful hunting season at Pinon Canyon, including on pronghorn. We were wary because the primary rifle season for pronghorn was closed, but you can see muzzleloader and archery really made up the difference. This year we had the highest number of pronghorn harvested using those two techniques than we've ever had before. Outreach, we're still going to be continuing to do lots of local outreach with the communities down here. Participated in the Tarantula Festival in La Junta as well, and we offer a open to the public Christmas bird count survey. So if you did want to volunteer to come out and to actually do bird watching and participate in the Audubon Society, we do that as well at Pinon Canyon. And any questions?
Hi, I'm Michelle Beck, I'm the wildlife biologist out there. I wanted to give a huge shout out to the fire department because we never would have been able to get that eagle camera. Those guys are amazing pulling it off, so thank you.
So it actually helps them fulfill one of their training requirements, which is high eagle rescue. So, barring any questions, I'll pass it on.
So on the eagle nesting, we put up what's called a notice to airmen, and we block off that area so no one flies over where the eagles are nesting to make sure they're protected. And that's something that Mr. Gass at Range Operations, he'll make sure that's put out working with our Butts Army Airfield. So we do keep that area off limits, so no aircraft fly near where the eagles are nesting.
All right, and we got one last briefer, Mitch or Rob, I don't know which one of you were gonna, I want you to talk just quickly about our controlled burns at Pinon Canyon and some of the local outreach that you guys are doing down here.
Okay.
Rod Fisher is our fire chief. Thanks, Rod.
Good morning. Okay. Good morning. Morning. So there was a lot of talk about the wildfire and our assistance and everything that we can do. So with the exercise coming up, there is going to be some mitigations that we need to do to get everything ready for the live fires. And we started talking about air qualities, particulates, everything else. So I have Peter Wolf here who can answer all those questions. But we're going to talk about all the mitigations that we're putting in place for that. So there's going to be some prescriptions, some prescribed fires that we're going to be doing starting today. There was a notice put out already, and apparently it was even in NPR this morning. So we're going to be taking small chunks of land and burning around it, so when they do actually do their training event and they are shooting their rounds, and if something does spark, we can keep it contained to a very small area. Now, some people hear fire and they get worried about that. Well, that's why we're doing a mitigation. So we're taking all these roads, we masticate around them, make sure that everything inside of it has clear perimeters so that we don't lose it and it goes further and further out. Okay, so we're gonna have our crews there with DPW resources as well as other Southern Colorado partner agencies that we have all of our mutual aid agreements with. They're gonna be there on site monitoring this as we take these small chunks. It's not gonna be one big swath. It's gonna be anywhere from 250 and below, and then the big fires will have up to 250 to 1,000 acres. Our biggest one, but it's not going to just be throwing matches out there and saying burn 1,000 acres. It's monitoring it in small little increments to make sure that we burn this out so that we don't have another big fire that just kicks off something and then we have to worry about it. So we are mitigating it so that we can have it controlled. Because you can't really control fire, and that's one of the big misconceptions. We're doing these prescriptions so that we can have a safe training event when they come here in May. Is there any questions that you guys
I have one.
Yes.
Do you pay attention to the red flag day? Since today is a red flag warning day.
We do pay attention to the red flag date, yes, we do. And we are following those according to what we have written in our prescription and our permits and what we can do. So we have all of the safety precautions and things in place for that.
Because today is one, and you said the fire was gonna start today.
We are tracking the red flag for today. We've laid on additional resources. We've also shrunk the burn unit to 29 acres.
So everything we do is per our permits that we have. Everything we do is weather dependent. Everything is done within the comfort levels of our operators that we have on there. And everything is a go, no go for the next day. So there's not gonna be anything out there that we're not following our permits, our comfort levels, and what our task book lets us do. Any other questions? Okay.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Chief. Appreciate it. Is there any other questions from people here today?
I've got to ask.
Sure.
Last year, Los Angeles County submitted a defense community infrastructure grant, and Fort Carson supported us in that grant. It was denied. But if that opportunity comes open again, we're going to be requesting funding to build two, I believe they're called hot point pads, where helicopters can come in, land on those pads, get fuel, go back to training. And the second one would be a large hangar that Fort Carson can house some of their helicopters, especially with the rogue storms that go across Pinon, to be able to fly in and house those helicopters and help protect them. So the ask is that if these grants become available, this grant becomes available again, that Fort Carson hopefully will support us again. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
My name is Anthony Gass. I'm the range officer for Fort Carson, and we've talked a lot about training here today and the importance of it. What I would like the community to understand is training equates survival in the next battlefield. If you look historically at our nation, be it World War II, the Korean War, when soldiers first deployed into the battlefield, because of their lack of training, resulted in high levels of casualties. Okay? So it's not just training, it's not just something we like to do. This is a direct correlation to if our soldiers are called on to go to whatever the next battlefield is. Their training, be it here, Fort Carson, directly is going to make it so that they're survivable. Okay. When I was in the service, the Army did a very long study, went all the way back to the Civil War, and the one thing they found is if you survive your first battle, you have a 90% chance that you'll survive the war, however long that is. Okay. Why are we more successful? Why in 20 years of the global war on terror did we have as few casualties as we had is because of how well our training has come from previous to that. Why are we putting the money and stuff in to support these environmental assessments is because the land is very important to us. If we do not have the sufficient areas for our soldiers to train, then we are basically condemning them to danger in the next battlefield, okay? So that's what I would leave with you, okay? Training means our soldiers are going to survive if they are called on to serve our nation, okay? So please keep that in mind. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Anthony. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
In the materials that were distributed at the scoping meeting, there was reference to the MDTF as kind of the background doctrine that is driving the enhancement. How is the MD, the transformation of Pinon Canyon to an MD multi-dimensional task force, right? How is that different from what has been occurring?
So I'll put it this way, it's not different. A multi-domain task force, it's a new style of unit, but we're taking what traditionally has been other type of units like long-range precision fires, military intelligence, and putting it in a special designed unit that focuses on bridging the gap between military intelligence and precision long-range fires. So what does it do? Enhancing Pinon Canyon for the multi-domain task force. It's the same as enhancing Pinon Canyon for any one of the other units that's currently at Fort Carson. It just enables a greater swath of training to be performed. There are a lot of capabilities within a multi-domain task force that I don't know yet if it's going to be stationed at Fort Carson, and that we don't have the space at Fort Carson to do certain things. So if you look at somewhere like White Sands Missile Range, and Fort Bliss, Texas, that crosses the boundary between Texas and New Mexico. Well, you can drive for 3.5 hours and still be driving along White Sands Missile Range. So a lot of that capability would have to go down there to shoot. The multi-domain task force was just picked to become the Fort Carson because we had the space availability and we have certain training capabilities here that are not unique necessarily to only our installation. But enhancing Pinon Canyon isn't just about the multi-domain task force. It's about all the units that are currently at Fort Carson. Did that answer your question, sir?
Yeah, actually, what I didn't say that is, and this may not be a real practical question, more of a philosophical question, but in my reading, I'm learning that AI is a big part of the precision and autonomous weapon systems are integrated into the multi-dimensional task force.
Yes.
That is kind of just a philosophical concern that I have.
Oh. Can we talk after this? You want to get into philosophy? That's a hard one. It's a lot to address.
Or maybe more simply, is AI an important aspect of this new doctrine?
AI is an important aspect to almost everything we do in life now. If you look at, privatized companies and how they're incorporating AI, if you look at machine learning, how is educational programs utilizing it? I'm not gonna lie, I used ChatGPT to rewrite some of my papers as I was going through my second master's, because my instructors wanted us to get comfortable asking those programs, how to rewrite things better. AI is something that's gonna impact everybody.
My concern is shutting out the human dimension in terms of decision making.
So right now, the way our doctrine is, there's gonna be a human in the loop. We're not turning over decisions, especially if a decision that is going to kill another person, to AI or machine. There's a human in the loop in all those decision makings that we do. I think that's my bottom line to you on that one, in terms of how we're incorporating AI and machine learning. There's a human in the loop on how we do those things.
Yeah, Pinon Canyon's important to the future. I don't know a lot about AI either, or what it is or what the future holds for it. But I do know, just from a doctrine standpoint, from the United States Army, okay, why is Pinon Canyon crucial? It's so we can win the first battle. And as we look across the world, how it's changing, the dynamics of it, we're a learning organization, right? So we're trying to see what everybody's doing, what's going on. The days of unified land operation, which was, where we used to be, we felt we could go toe to toe with anybody, anywhere, on any single domain, right? So the idea is you have an army, I have an army, I think I can beat you. As we look across and as more countries are starting to develop, we used to own the night. I question whether we say we own the night anymore. A lot of third world country now has night optics and things like that. So as we look across a near peer threat, we may say, okay, you have an army, we have an army, we may be evenly matched. But when we look across multiple domains, that's where we think we can press the enemy in order to beat them, right? So, yep, our armies meet, but it's like if you're facing my army, my Air Force, my Navy, so in order to do that, you have to coordinate at a much higher level. So, me on the ground, if I'm fighting the enemy, it's hard for me to talk back to a Navy ship, that's in the sea and trying to coordinate what assets it has in order to deliver effects on the enemy. So to do that, we need bigger headquarters. So when we fought against Iraq, we fought as a brigade combat team. That was probably the largest maneuver element that we were using. As we look across a near-peer threat, we now need higher headquarters. So we're now going to start fighting as a division in order to get other assets across other domains in order to give us the advantage on the battlefield. And that's why you see, when you're coming into Pinon Canyon, we need a little bit more space. Everything on Fort Carson is built for that brigade combat team, so it's training companies and below. We need something to where we can literally at scale maneuver and be able to do it at a larger scale. So when we do, God forbid, meet the enemy on the battlefield, we're ready for it. If that makes sense.
I know we run long today, but there was a lot of good questions, and I really appreciate everybody coming. If you just give me a couple minutes to wrap this up. History is important, all right? And for a lot of you who are from Southern Colorado, the history of Pinon Canyon is personal, because it goes back over 40 years for a lot of you. Let me tell you about, from the Army perspective, history is important to us too. And I'll tell you why it's personal for me as well. So, piggybacking on Sergeant Major and Mr. Gass, what they said. If you look at the history of the United States Army, we have a history of losing the first battle of each of our wars. If you look at World War II, when we fought at Kasserine Pass, the first time the U.S. Army fought the German Army, we thought we were ready. Our infantry was really good, our armor was really good, our field artillery was really good, but they didn't know how to operate together cohesively in a term that we call combined arms training. The Germans did. They wrote the book on it. At the end of that first 24 hours, you had over 6,000 U.S. killed, wounded, and missing. And the Germans had penetrated up to 50 miles beyond Allied lines. Fast forward to Korea, Task Force Smith. All right, Task Force Smith was considered one of the most ready units in Army history at the time. They were forward deployed to Japan. They're helping with the occupation and rebuilding of Japan, doing law enforcement type work. But on paper, they were deemed ready. They were rapidly overrun within that first 24 hours by the North Koreans, who had better technology and better weapon systems. So the Army at the time, in 1973, the Yom Kippur War kicked off in October 73. And we just built a new command called Training and Doctrine Command. And we saw it, and we said, this is the first modern war. So in 1973, as TRADOC, as it's called, Training and Doctrine Command, went out to go assess and review the Yom Kippur War. They found tank lethality had improved by 400% in that 30 years from World War II to 1973. It was the first war of mass use of night vision fighting equipment, integrated artillery with maneuver units on the ground, integrated air defense systems, so aircraft could not freely fly unopposed. And the Israelis were outnumbered by about 5 to 6 Arab armies to the Israeli army. Right? Israel survived. Why? It's not because they had better technology. All that Russian equipment was better than the Israelis were using. It's because they had better training. Training was important. When we came out of that, we saw at the time, any Vietnam veterans in the room? Okay. So at the time as we were coming out of Vietnam, we were saying, hey, we're not ready to fight the Soviets in the Warsaw Pact in Europe. We've spent so much time in Vietnam, we're not prepared. And we looked at Yom Kippur, and what it did for us was a mass modernization of the Army in the 70s. All right? Created a new doctrine, airland battle. We created new equipment. And a lot of that equipment that we use today, our tanks, our helicopters, our air defense systems, were built from the lessons learned of the Yom Kippur War of 1973. We had this new doctrine. We changed socially. We're no longer a draft army. We created an all-volunteer force. We changed the basic training of how we train our soldiers. We train NCO and officer education. It was a mass retooling of the Army. And then we needed places to train and use it. We created the National Training Center in Southern California, Joint Readiness Training Center, and unfortunately during that time, in 1983, we created Pinon Canyon Maneuver Site because of our studies of the Yom Kippur War. And we needed the space to operate at that scale. Well, you look at Desert Storm. Because of the training and the capabilities we did in the 80s with that new doctrine, the new technology, the new way when we were training and educating our service members. In 100 hours, we defeated the 4th largest army in the world. Fast forward to 2003, the invasion of Iraq. All right? Outnumbered, we only moved 350 miles in 21 days to seize Baghdad. It's incredible what we were capable of doing. But here we are coming out of the global war on terrorism now. 2 decades almost of Iraq and Afghanistan. But we find ourselves in a very similar spot. So we've looked at 2 wars recently. One called the Nagorno-Karabakh between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and the other one that everybody's more used to knowing is the Ukraine war right now. And we find it's a new dimension of warfare, just like we saw during the Yom Kippur War. We've had drones for a long time, but now you have loitering drones. Drones that you can program and send up, and they can loiter over an area, and they can identify an enemy tank or vehicle and strike it on its own. All right? The ability of long-range precision fires now. Social media is a weapon as a platform. All right? Imagine you 2 are Russian soldiers, and you got to do that selfie, right? Because you and your boy Doug are out there getting ready to go. And you post it on your Facebook page.
They look like some selfie kind of guys.
There's intelligence units out there that scan Facebook, social media, and they see that. And there's been multiple cases in Ukraine of Russian soldiers doing that. And 2 to 3 minutes later, an artillery strike coming right on that position. We can track cell phones. And we're seeing that, a lot of this new technology, we have to prepare for that next, war. You got to win that first battle in the next war. All right? Because when you lose that first battle, it's costly not just in missed opportunity, but in human lives. All right? And that's why enhancing Pinon Canyon right now, that's important to us in the Army. I'll tell you why it's personal for me. I got 4 years in Iraq and Afghanistan. I've lost count the number of times I've been under enemy contact. All right? I've made decisions that have resulted in American wounded and dead. I know that. I know every single decision that I've made in combat that has resulted in that. I have met Gold Star family members, to include fallen family members, that my decisions led to their sons being killed in combat. Right? That's personal for me. That's why we're looking at right now, we need to enhance Pinon Canyon's, ability to train. For a lot of you, it's personal too, because you've had 4 decades of what? False promises, right? The Army taking land, we'll never take any more land. Now 2008, we want to take more land. It's hard for you to believe someone like me in this uniform standing up here. I know I can't convince a lot of you and a lot of your neighbors, but this is why we're trying to explain to you why we need to do this right now. And hopefully we continue to work as a group. We can meet in the middle somehow. I'm tracking, we owe you that siege report, all right? Well, please get with Dee or a PAO team here, confirm your email. If you're interested in wanting to know after training events, can you come down and look at what our ITAM contractors do, our range operations do, how we remediate the land. We can look into that, potentially things beyond community days to come out with Mike Camp's team and see how they take care of it, or go along with our environmental team. All right, we're open to having those dialogues and trying to show you that what are we doing in terms of an environmental perspective and how we're trying to take care of this training area. And so therefore we can take care of Southern Colorado as well. All right. Thank you very much for coming today. This is the most interactive Southern Colorado working group I have had in my 18 months of command. I encourage you or anybody else who wants to come to the future ones, please come back. Let's have more of a dialogue. The Garrison team will stay behind if you have more one-on-one questions. I'll turn it over to Dee for anything. Where'd Dee go? She's
behind you over here.
Behind me, hiding?
Yep.
Dee, last words to you.
No, I'm good, sir. Thanks you, everybody, for coming. Let us know if you need anything.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah.